Alright guys, grab your coffee and brace yourselves for a second. Because a major update in the Lynette Hooker case just completely flipped the whole timeline on its head. Now, we all know the story Brian Hooker spun, how a rough wave tossed his wife off their dinghy in the Bahamas. We've been tracking this case for a while, and honestly, people were getting tired of the same old narrative. But whatever you have been told before this, whatever excuses Brian came up with, this new revelation completely shatters his innocence. Months before she went missing, Lynette sent a terrified private text, warning her closest friends that Brian's temper was getting out of control and she was terrified to be stuck at sea with him. This flips the story from a tragic accident to something cold and calculated. Before we jump into this evidence, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get into it. That secret text message from Lynette completely shatters the tragic accident theory,
exposing a grim look at what was really happening out on that water.
To see why her inner circle immediately suspected foul play, we must listen directly to the raw phone call recorded by Blaine Stevenson, a close sailing buddy of both Lynette and Brian Hooker. Blaine Stevenson, who met the couple during their Florida sailing travels back in 2023, didn't record that call because he was suspicious. He just captured the audio as a basic reference log to help track, mapping coordinates and tides so he could help search from a distance. But as Brian kept talking, his timeline started to fall apart fast. Brian claimed that after sailing out of Hopetown around 7:30 p.m., rough waters hit their small dinghy, tossing Lynette right over the side. He claimed the motor died because she had the emergency kill switch key with her, forcing him to row blindly through pitch blackness for over 8 hours, until he finally drifted ashore at Marsh Harbor around 4 a.m. But during that exact call, Blaine Stevenson caught a massive, chilling contradiction. Brian said that when Lynette went overboard, the sun was still setting. For anyone who knows island coordinates and April maritime charts, that simple claim makes absolutely no geographic sense. If they took off at 7:30 p.m., darkness had already covered the sea. Why lie about the sun unless you are desperately trying to fix the clock? And the red flags just kept piling up. Brian claimed he couldn't grab life jackets or fire emergency flares because they were packed deep under the seats, an excuse that left Blaine Stevenson totally speechless. Real sailors don't pack away life-saving gear during a life-or-death emergency. That impossible sunlight story was only the start of the cracks in Brian's alibi. As the secret recording between the main suspect and his close friend Blaine kept playing, an even more chilling pattern emerged. Brian sounded completely cold, showing zero real panic or grief for a man who just lost his wife to the pitch-black ocean. And the suspicious behavior didn't stop there. By Wednesday morning, just days after the alleged accident, Bahamian police grew highly suspicious of Brian's story and his shifting timeline, placing him under a strict 5-day arrest. But instead of staying in the Bahamas to help search teams scan the neighboring islands, Brian did something that completely shocked his closest friends. The very second the court ordered his release, he fled the country. He completely dropped off the local radar and hired an expensive defense lawyer in Michigan, and completely cut off all contact with Lynette's grieving family, including her 28-year-old daughter, Carly. His sudden flight left everyone asking the exact same burning question. If Brian really had absolutely nothing to hide, why was he actively running away from the exact spot where his wife supposedly drowned? He wouldn't even sit beside his own attorney during a bizarre, highly orchestrated press conference that raised far more questions than answers. It looked like a cheap magician's trick designed to distract the public while he quietly slipped completely out of the headlines. Meanwhile, out on the water, local experienced boat captains began pulling harbor security camera footage from that same Saturday night. What they uncovered completely destroys Brian's claim of a sudden maritime emergency. The video evidence proves that during the exact hour Brian claims massive 2 to 4 foot waves tossed his wife from the dinghy, the ocean water was actually dead calm. This calm water footage completely destroys Brian's defense, turning this supposed boating accident into a chilling investigation. If there were no massive waves to knock Lynette overboard, then whatever happened out there in the dark was definitely no accident.
This shocking betrayal of trust became undeniable when Blaine,
Stevenson and his wife realized how deeply Brian had hidden his explosive temper from their entire boating circle. Looking back at his social media, his friends noticed a disturbing shift. Brian was completely consumed by intense, aggressive political rage that regularly boiled over into hostile online fights. He wasn't the easygoing retired cruiser he pretended to be. He was a ticking time bomb, and those closest to him were starting to see the cracks. The most damning piece of this puzzle centers on a dark secret from late 2023. Brian and Lynette had actually split up for almost 2 months because his behavior became completely unhinged. That was when Lynette sent a private warning text to Blaine's wife, explicitly stating she could no longer live on a boat with him or be left completely alone with him at sea.
She lived in terror of his aggressive rage.
When they finally reconciled, they unexpectedly cut out alcohol entirely. A sudden change that left their friends wondering what kind of hidden domestic crisis had really unfolded behind closed doors on that vessel. The case took a bizarre turn when outside journalists had to hunt down a citizen photograph showing what Lynette was wearing on her final day because Bahamian authorities completely failed to share crucial harbor footage with their own rescue teams. For 5 long weeks, there was complete silence from island police, who released only 3. A few brief updates, then the search stopped entirely. Local communications collapsed completely, leaving Lynette's family totally stranded. But the investigation took a massive federal turn when the United States Coast Guard stepped in. Federal investigators seized the couple's 46-foot sailboat permanently, towing the Soulmate straight to Fort Pierce, Florida, for a deep forensic search. This was no longer a standard missing person case. It had become an active federal maritime investigation, and what investigators uncovered inside the vessel completely changed the game. Using specialized testing, federal agents discovered hidden physical anomalies inside the hull and massive logbook gaps that completely shattered Brian's travel timeline. Even worse, as the federal case builds in America, the actual search for Lynette in the Bahamas has ground to a halt. Meanwhile, Brian is sucking all the oxygen out of the room, leaving her heartbroken 28-year-old daughter, Carly, trapped in agonizing limbo. Every single dry bag or piece of floating debris recovered from the Atlantic over the next 10 years will remain a painful scar for this family. Blaine Stevenson is now issuing a desperate, public plea to get private search teams back on the water, because finding Lynette is all that matters. Meanwhile, financial records show that Brian has completely vanished, liquidating his assets through offshore accounts and potentially fleeing to a non-extradition nation. The entire case has transformed from a tragic accident into a desperate hunt for the truth. Every frame of harbor security footage, every secret text, and every forensic clue points away from an accident and straight towards something much more sinister. We cannot let this case fade into silence while a daughter searches for answers. What do you think actually happened out there in those dark ocean waters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not let this case be forgotten.